grateful that I could be asked to come up here and preach tonight in front of all y'all. So do want to, I want to say thanks to Chris for being my disciple and preparing me for that, and Frank having enough faith that I thinks that I won't blow this, but we'll see what happens. Before we go into, I guess, the message and kind of the journey along with the word, as you can clearly see and read, is that when going through a study of words, it's some things that we're going to go through is obviously, in case you don't know, the law first mentioned, so getting context for the words, getting the definition, letting God tell us what that word means by going to see where it first is or first was mentioned, get that context and work off the definition from there. We're going to be doing that a lot tonight. And then the other fun thing about words is that the English Bible that we have today was translated from Greek and Hebrew. So sometimes those words are the same word, but two different words in our Bible. That's not saying that, man has corrupted the Bible or that the God who made the universe is fallible, but just that has different connotations. And we're going to see some of that tonight for some of our definitions and understanding what words mean. So I just wanted to kind of get that out of the way, get that up front, so when we see this happen, you're not like, yo, that's two different words. But we know what's going on. So first things first, abomination, that's what I decided to go over. First time I went through this was actually with Chris for our discipleship. He wanted me to kind of bring him a message, and this is one of them that I had. And the first time I heard this was back when we were in Southside. I think for some of us who were there, Robert had brought up the word, and it was just stood out to me, and I was like, what does that word mean? What does it have to deal with? What's it about? And I was just really interested and decided to go into it, and I felt that it was really, coincidental that Frank last week also said, hey, who here's done a word study on the word abomination? And if you noticed, I was probably the only one to shoot my hand up real fast and be like, oh, that's me. I totally did that. So wanted to bring it to y'all so that way we can all be up to speed, kind of know the same thing in a sense. So abomination. Let's go ahead and start with the definition. So the word abomination in the Hebrew is that word there. I'm not going to try it because I'm just going to butcher it, but that's the Hebrew word of abomination that I started with, that we started to go through, and the working definition for it that I went with was morally disgusting / idolatry. So, of course, law first mentioned. Let's go ahead and see what or where it was first mentioned. It would be in Genesis 43, verse 32. And it says, and they set on for him by himself, and for them by themselves, and for the Egyptians which did eat with him by themselves, because the Egyptians might not eat bread with the Hebrews, for that is an abomination unto the Hebrews, or unto the Egyptians, my apologies. So I was like, okay, let's go ahead, let's try and plug in at least one of our working definitions, see if the context even makes sense, because if it doesn't, it's probably not the definition. So the second part there in that verse, it says, because the Egyptians might not eat bread with the Hebrews, for that is morally disgusting unto the Egyptians. We know the relationship between the Egyptians and the Hebrews, and I would probably say it's not too far off. Might make some sense. Also, we could maybe apply that to ourselves and take that a step further. We know that the similitude or the picture of Egypt is the world, and the Hebrews in this sense is God's people, so maybe we could extrapolate something for ourselves and say that the world views God's people as morally disgusting. And isn't that ever so prevalent today? I'm about to say, if we're part of a church or believe in God, the way the world's set up today does not agree with us, and we are crazy compared to them. But I didn't really like that the first time the word's mentioned is in one, obviously it's a bad context, or bad connotation, but it's also with the Egyptians. I would expect that the first time a word is used, it's going to be with God and have something to do with God. So I wanted to go through and be like, okay, well, this is the first time it's mentioned, it has to do with the Egyptians and the Hebrews. I was like, well, when's the first time the word's mentioned in regards to God? That'd be in Leviticus 7:18. And if any of the flesh of the sacrifice of his peace offering, or of his peace offerings, be eaten at all on the third day, it shall not be accepted, neither shall it be imputed unto him that offereth it. It shall be an abomination, and the soul that eateth of it shall bear his iniquity. It's like, okay, that's interesting. So in terms of morally disgusting, sure, we could plug that in there, and say that it's morally disgusting if this offering is done incorrectly to God, so God views it as being an abomination. But going a step further, this is the Levitical law. This is God's word, God's law to his people, and if they don't follow, or if God's people don't follow his law in disobedience, it's an abomination. It's morally disgusting. So I was like, so maybe even we could plug in a little idolatry there, saying that if we think that we're better than God, we want to do what we want, that it's an abomination. But let's focus on that disobedience, how if the Hebrews were to disobey God's law, that it would be an abomination. So we're going to go down that road with idolatry and see what we can find. So idolatry. Working definition that I had for it is image worship or rejecting the Word of God. And hopefully, we can kind of see that. So the first time the word idolatry is mentioned is, and that's just the word idolatry, not like idol or idolater, but the word idolatry is in 1 Samuel 15, 22 to 26. That's not on the board because that would have been too small for everybody, so if y'all want to go ahead and turn there, don't worry, I have to also click there, so give us some time. And again, we want to give at least wide enough verses to get the context, because we just don't want to pick and choose the words or pick and choose verses to wrest the scriptures for ourselves. So 1 Samuel 15, 22 to 26. And Samuel said, Hath the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of rams. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness as it is as iniquity and idolatry. Because thou hast rejected the word of the Lord, he hath also rejected thee from being king. And Saul said unto Samuel, I have sinned, for I have transgressed the commandment of the Lord and thy words, because I feared the people, and obeyed their voice. Now therefore I pray thee, pardon my sin, and turn again with me, that I may worship the Lord. And Samuel said unto Saul, I will not return with thee, for thou hast rejected the word of the Lord, and the Lord has rejected thee from being king over Israel. So, tying in there with disobedience, that it is, even Samuel says it's better to obey the Lord than it is to sacrifice, but tying in there for idolatry, it is stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. And then immediately following idolatry, God says, because thou hast rejected the word of the Lord. So I wanted, again, just to point out that though there may not be a direct relationship, but God took time to say, right after that, what stubbornness is, that it is idolatry, and goes in to tell Saul, well, because you've rejected the word of the Lord, because you've decided to listen to the people rather than me, God, that God's rejecting him. And idolatry, again, is if it's image worship or rejecting the word of the Lord, Saul put someone or something in the place of God. And as we know, can't serve two masters. In Matthew 6:24, no man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. Ye cannot serve God and mammon. So I just wanted to remind us, again, going down this idea of abomination, how it's idolatry, it's image worship, how even Saul decided, hey, I'm going to ignore God, what he said. I'm going to put someone in place of God, replace that throne, because again, it's all about a throne, as Frank's gone over. Either God sitting on the throne, or something or someone else is. In this case for Saul, it was the people. And can't serve both. So he's committed idolatry, he's committed an abominable work. Now, going on that idea of sitting on a throne and talking about image worship, made me start thinking, okay, well, if there's image worship, well, what's that word image? What's that about? So the first time I decided, hey, you know what, we're going to keep this trend going. When was the first time the word image was ever mentioned in the Bible? Well, that'd be Genesis 1. It's crazy how all these words, first time they're ever mentioned, is always in Genesis. It's like God's laying out our definitions at the beginning, so that way we don't have to keep, or we have something to go back to as we continue to read His Word. But in Genesis 1:26, and God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth." So, okay. First time the word image is ever mentioned has to do with the connotation of God. It's actually the exact opposite of the word abomination, how it had to do with Egypt. I was like, sick, cool. First time it's mentioned has to do with God, making Adam in His image. Perfect. Well, that's not exactly, can be said the same thing for the last time the word is mentioned. In Revelation 20 and verse 4, I saw thrones, and they sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus and for the word of God, and which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had received his mark upon the foreheads or in their hands, and they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. So the last time the word image is ever mentioned in the Bible has to do with the image of the beast, has to do with Satan. Again, reiterating idolatry, going back to who sits on a throne. Is it going to be God, the first time the word image is mentioned, or Satan, the second time the word image is mentioned? Since we're all here tonight, I have a feeling we're not going to choose the second one. We're going to probably go with that first one. So I was like, okay, cool. We got the image, we got images, we know who sits on the throne, who doesn't. So what's going on with this image of God thing? Well, you better believe we're going to go to the first time it was mentioned. In Genesis 1:27. So God created man in His own image, and in the image of God created He him, male and female created He them. And now we're going to kind of deviate a little bit here. I wanted to kind of just park on this and go over some things just because I've had conversations with people about whether or not we're made in the image of God. I would disagree and say we're not. I'm going to show some verses here and go over that with us and back that up. And the reason being is because if we can deceive ourselves into thinking that we are still in His image, it just kind of breaks down a lot of the pictures that God has and ultimately puts us in a place of idolatry, thinking that we don't need God and we know better than Him. But so anyways, the first time it's mentioned has to do with God creating Adam in His image. So okay, so man in this realm, Adam was made in the image of God. Not going to argue that one. So Adam, yep, definitely in his image. But then, even Adam had a son after his image. So cool, we got Adam in the image of God and his sons in his image. Problem is there's a few chapters in between when Adam's mentioned having a kid and when he's made. In Genesis 5:3, it says, "And Adam lived 130 years and begat a son in his own likeness, after his image, and called his name Seth." The problem with this is that Adam has already fallen. He's in a fallen state. And if we're going to say that we're still in the image of God, well, God's not in a fallen state. Clearly, Adam had a son in his image, which is in a fallen state. So would we say that God is sinful? God is in a fallen state? I don't think we in here, nor the people out there that we have conversations with would even agree with that. So we might say that the image was lost. Matthew 18:11, "For the Son of Man came to save that which was lost." I'm not going to say it was the only thing. Adam also lost the relationship he had with God, but definitely the image of God, I'd say, is lost. And if we're like, some of those people might be like, well, it's a little bit of a stretch. It doesn't really say all that. All right. Excellent. So we got Romans 8:29. "For whom He did foreknow," that'd be the church, He also did predestinate to be conformed to His image, that He might be the firstborn among many brethren. So the predestinate is talking about the church. God, speaking of God here, he knew that he was going to need a car, a vehicle to help do his work. So he predestinated the church, not the individual. But that church is to be conformed to his image. So if we were already in the image of God before we were saved, why would we need to be conformed to it if we're already in it? Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You also start, again, breaking down a few things that it just doesn't make sense. We have to throw out sanctification because there's no point to setting ourselves apart if we're already in his image. Then we start asking, well, would God really send me to hell? I mean, I'm in his image. Like, I'm basically already part of his family. So it kind of just all falls apart. And in case we're curious, or if we can at least say we buy into the idea that, okay, we're not made in the image of God, we need to be conformed to this image. Well, who's this image we need to be conformed to? I'm so glad y'all asked. Y'all are killing it tonight. 2 Corinthians 4:4. In whom the God of this world hath blinded the minds of them which believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine unto them. Perfect. So now we know that the image that we should be worshiping, the image that we should be conforming to, is Jesus. And as Billy went over, I believe last Sunday, we got John 4 to John 17 to show us his works, and then we got 66 books to tell us who Jesus is, because Jesus is the Word, and the Word is Jesus. So then, okay. So, going through again, Abomination. So we've established that it's idolatry. It's replacing the Word of God. It is letting someone else other than God be on that throne. Now we're going to work on that morally disgusting part. So there are more than what I've listed, but there are some areas in the Bible that God has taken out of his time to tell us what is an abomination to him. And we're going to go through just some of these. So I'm sure we've all heard the first one, if you've been here for any amount of time, which is Proverbs 6:16 to 19. These 6 things doth the Lord hate, yea, 7 are an abomination unto him. A proud look, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood, and heart that deviseth wicked imaginations, feet that be swift in running to mischief, a false witness that speaketh lies, and he that soweth discord among the brethren. So, discord amongst brethren, discord amongst us, is an abomination to God. And in case you don't know what discord is, or that kind of hazy on that definition, this goes back to those words meaning, or the same word having 2 different words. The word discord is translated elsewhere, like in Psalms 80 verse 6, as strife. So, thou makest us a strife unto our neighbors, and our enemies laugh among themselves. So the context for this, I didn't put all the verses for it, is just how Israel was just leaving, or was taken out of Egypt. They were going into their promised land. They were taking out the heathen, and their neighbors, or the surrounding nations, they were causing strife with them, and their enemies were laughing at them. And this makes sense for the verses, or for other verses that say how Israel is going to be a burdensome stone to the nations, to the world. So, causing strife, causing discord, causing contentions, that amongst us is what is abomination to God. Proverbs 11:1. And in case you didn't know, the majority of these abominations are going to be in Proverbs. Who would have known? Solomon, the wisest man who lived, might have something to say on this. But anyways, Proverbs 11:1. A false balance is abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight. And just as another connotation, or another extra verses to kind of back up this thought would be in, surprise, Leviticus, God's law again, 19:36 to 37. Just balances, just weights, a just ephah, a just hin, shall ye have. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Therefore ye shall observe all my statutes and all my judgments, and do them. I am the Lord. And in case you're curious, that word ephah is just a measurement of grain, and the word hin is just a measurement of liquid. So God's basically telling them, like, y'all shall have no shady business going on. You're going to do what I say. You're going to live by my words and do my commandments, because I am your Lord. I am your God. Maybe we can even take that and apply that to ourselves, that we shouldn't have any shady business going on, and we should live by every word of God. Proverbs 11:20. They that are of froward heart are abomination to the Lord, but such as are upright in their way are his delight. And again, that word froward, in case you're curious, is translated elsewhere as crooked, as we can see in Deuteronomy 32, verse 5. They have corrupted themselves. Their spot is not the spot of his children. They are a perverse and crooked generation. Proverbs 12:22. Lying lips are abomination to the Lord, but they that deal truly are his delight. I think we all know what lying is. Didn't think we needed to really go into that one. Proverbs 15:8. The sacrifice of the wicked is an abomination to the Lord, but the prayer of the upright is his delight. Proverbs 15:9. The way of the wicked is an abomination unto the Lord, but he loveth him that followeth after righteousness. Proverbs 15:26. The thoughts of the wicked are an abomination to the Lord, but the words of the pure are pleasant words. And again, just kind of notice between those last three verses how we can connect them between the thoughts. They have to start in our mind before they go into action. So that way, there is only one way. There's the way, the truth, and the life. Narrow is the way. Wide is the way of destruction. And it all starts in our minds and our thoughts. So that's why we got to be careful about what we're taking in, what we're allowing to hold our time, and what we're allowing to sit on the throne of our hearts. Proverbs 16:5. Everyone that is proud in heart is an abomination to the Lord. Though hand join in hand, he shall not be unpunished. And as we know, pride, Proverbs 16:18, goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. And I'll be the first one to admit, it will destroy you. Very recently, I was being very prideful at work, being very just stuck in my ways, not wanting to listen to authority, and thought that I knew it all, and was just, you know what, nah, I know better than everybody here. I'm smarter than all of y'all. I just want to do what I want. And I took that home with me, and for a good solid month or so, it was just, I was not having a good time. I was just being destroyed. I was just all about myself. And so it will, it's not going to be, your life's going to be blown up, but it will just slowly destroy you if you just want to be stuck up in pride. Proverbs 17:15. He that justifieth the wicked, and he that condemneth the just, even they both are abomination to the Lord. That makes me think about how, I believe it says somewhere that they will call evil good and good evil, as we see in today's age especially. Like stuff that's going on now, 30 years ago, been unheard of to think about what's going on today. And I wasn't even alive 30 years ago. Proverbs 24 and verse 9. The thought of foolishness is sin, and the scorner is an abomination to men. And if you're asking, man, what is a scorner? Well, don't worry. God gives us an example. In Proverbs 15:12, a scorner loveth not one that reproveth him, neither will he go unto the wise. So reproveth just means like correction. Obviously, we talk about that a lot here, about how we need to go to the scriptures and let it reprove us, correct us for for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness. And we'll not go to the wise. So it'd be someone who can't take criticism very well, can't take you coming to him and be like, hey man, I just want to let you know you're doing this wrong. We need to do this right. Nah. And then when they need help, they're like, man, I don't know what I'm doing. Why don't you go ask the guy who you told not to? No, I'm not going to go to him. He doesn't know what he's talking about, even though he knows exactly what he's talking about. Proverbs 29 and 27. An unjust man is an abomination to the just, and he that is upright in the way of abomination, I am out of it. And he that is upright in the way is abomination to the wicked. So there we get to see a nice little, again, another compare and contrast between an unjust man is an abomination to the just, as a upright man or a just man is an abomination to the unjust or the wicked. God's wonderful at putting us, or giving us are those comparisons. My bad. Obviously, Leviticus 18:20-22. Moreover, thou shalt not lie carnally with thy neighbor's wife to defile thyself with her, and thou shalt not let any of thy seed pass through the fires of Molech, neither shalt thou profane the name of thy God. I am the Lord. Thou shalt not lie with mankind as with womankind. It is abomination. So in case we're unclear, homosexuality is an abomination to God. So we're going to park on that for just a little bit as the reason why is, so talking about images, talking about pictures, talking about similitudes. God paints for us these wonderful pictures that way of heavenly things, that way we can have an understanding and concepts of what's going on. And one of the pictures that breaks down, if we allow it to be, or if we allow homosexuality to be a thing, is this image or picture of marriage. So I'm going to do my best to try and paint it for y'all as to why it is an abomination. So marriage, we got one man and one woman. Generally speaking, I'd say that per the Bible, the woman leaves her family and cleaves unto her husband. And then, as we've seen in Genesis, we have the husband, or Adam in this instance, who's the leader, who leads the wife, who has a mission. She comes along as a helpmeet to help him complete his mission. Okay, so there's that. In terms of a worldly point of view, that's generally how things work. We have an order to things. We have one who leads, one who follows, one leaves their wife to join the other. And so the similitude or there for the picture for us would be Jesus and the church. So we got Jesus, who would be our groom, the church, who would be the bride. We're all part of the bride of Christ. He has a mission that all would be saved. We get to come along as a helpmeet to him. We are the hands, we are the feet. So now we get to partake in helping him. He leads us. We submit. And we could go even a step further and say that we were part of another family, Satan's family, at one point, until we had a relationship with Jesus, at which point we left our old family to cleave unto him to help him with this mission. So now let's start plugging in this other way. So I would say that pretty well works out for one man, one woman, the church, God. Let's start plugging in the other two ways it could play out and see what happens. So let's say it's a man and a man. So we got two people leading, no one to follow. So we got two different directions that's going on. So there's no one to help you out. There's no one leaving the other family to cleave unto. And if we're going to take that spiritually, so we got God being with God, or Jesus being with Jesus, which is already a thing with the Trinity, but there's no relationship, so there's no point for him to even come down to save us because we're not part of that picture. So that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And if we go woman with woman, okay, so now we got someone who's supposed to come and help, getting with someone else who's supposed to come and help. So now there's no leadership. They're both helping each other, but they don't know what they're helping themselves for, like if we were to plug in the church. So who's the church supposed to help? What guidance, what mission are we supposed to do if Jesus isn't in the picture? It doesn't make any sense. Which is why it's an affront to God and ruins a wonderful picture that God has set up for us in our marriages. Just felt like it was a good thing to park on that and talk to. So now we're going to get back to wrapping things up with Abomination. One little charge here, and that'll be it for the night. So I wanted to point out for us that this list, the last list for this morally disgusting part of the abomination is, yes, these acts are abominable, but it's the people. The people are an abomination that commit these things. In Proverbs 6:16-19, it's he that soweth discord amongst the brethren. It's they that are a froward heart. It's everyone that is proud in heart. It's he that justifieth the wicked, and he that condemned the just. It's the scorner. It's the unjust man to the just. And I say all that to say is, much like with Saul, or from earlier what we saw when he committed idolatry, that he was still part of God's chosen people, much like as we're still part of God's family. So this is not a salvation topic. But when we commit these acts, when we commit these abominable works, we become an abomination ourselves to God. So when I was caught up in my prideful ways, I was an abomination. And much like Saul, I couldn't be used. I couldn't be used how God wanted me to be. So for Saul, he was removed as king, and God said, you know what? Since you've rejected my word, I'm going to go find someone who isn't going to reject my word to get the job done. Frank always talks about it. God doesn't need us. He's going to get the mission done with or without us. That's just what this is talking about. If we allow ourselves to get caught up in, talking about one another here, like, man, can you believe what Peyton did last week? If you don't, I'll tell you later. Or if we get caught up in pride, if we want to become that scorner, if we want to just justify the unjust, that ruins our testimony. Obviously in here, we have each other to hold each other accountable, but out in our workplaces, out with the friends, the other families that don't believe the same thing we are, don't have a relationship with Jesus, we ruin that testimony by just them looking at us and be like, I can do the same thing without you. Now God can no longer use us for that. We get replaced with someone else who has to come along and do what we could have done for him. We lose out on rewards and crowns that we could give to him. So, in closing, when we go out, when we leave here, when we're out there in our workplace, because I would say that the majority of our time is either spent at work or here, at least for some of us. For me, it's mainly at work. That's where the majority of the world's going to see us. That's where we're really going to be tested, and we get to have the choice of, are we going to be an abomination to God and be useless, or are we going to stop, think about what God has said, and do what he's asked us to do? Just have conversations with people, live the way he's asked us to live. That's it for the night. I want to thank you so much for coming out, and also